Theory of the Nation of Lilith. The theory of the nation of Lilith is one of the most controversial speculations in the discussion about the possibility of humans existing before Adam. This concept has its roots in the ancient Jewish tradition that is not included in the canonical Bible, but developed in the literature of the Midrash, the Zohar, and Kabbalah texts. According to the alphabet of Ben Sira, 8th to 10th century AD, Lilith was Adam's first wife who was created with him from the ground, not from his ribs, like Eve. Lilith refused a subordinate position in a sexual relationship with Adam, uttering the name of God that should not be spoken, then flew away from Eden. The Zohar text mentions that after leaving Eden, Lilith had relations with Samael, an angel or demon figure, and gave birth to thousands of demons called candles every day. Some further interpretations developed the idea that these descendants of Lilith created a separate human race that was fundamentally different from the descendants of Adam and Eve. Proponents of this theory often attribute it to narrative gaps in Genesis, such as where Cain's wife came from, or who Cain feared would kill him after he was cast out. They speculate that Cain may have married a woman of Lilith's descent. Some modern interpreters associate the Lilith myth with figures of the ancient Mesopotamian goddesses such as Lamashtu or Inanna, who were later demonized in the patriarchal Jewish tradition. However, there is no direct archaeological evidence to support the existence of a separate pre-Adamite civilization. From a modern genetic perspective, this theory contradicts scientific evidence about human evolution and the common origin of Homo sapiens. Nevertheless, the Lilith nation theory remains interesting as a mythological study and has influenced works of literature, art, and popular culture. The Sons of God theory. The Sons of God theory proposed the controversial hypothesis that the heavenly beings mentioned in Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4 not only interacted with humans after the Adamic era, but were actually present and created a hybrid civilization before Adam was created. The text of Genesis 6 verse 4 states, In those days the giants were on earth, and also after that, when the sons of God approached the daughters of humanity, and the women gave birth to their children, these were the mighty men of old, the famous men. The phrase, and also after that, opens up the interpretation that this phenomenon occurred before and after a certain event. In the book of Enoch, an apocryphal text quoted in the letter of Jude in the New Testament, there's a more detailed narrative about 200 angels called Watchers led by Semiaza and Azazel. They descended on Mount Hermon, took wives from among humans, and taught various skills such as metallurgy, weapon making, cosmetics, astrology, and magic. Supporters of this theory point to megalithic structures around the world such as Gobekli Tepe, 12,000 years old, or Gunung Padang in Indonesia, which demonstrate advanced architectural and astronomical expertise that does not fit with conventional narratives about the evolution of human civilization. They speculate that this knowledge may have originated from interactions with the sons of God before the Adamic era. Some interpreters draw parallels to the Sumerian myth of the Anunnaki, who are said to have descended from the heavens to create humans as workers. Zecharia Sitchin developed the controversial theory that Elohim in Genesis refers to extraterrestrials, and the sons of God are the descendants of their hybrids. The mainstream academic community rejects this interpretation, explaining that the term sons of God in the ancient Semitic context is more likely to refer to a noble lineage or pious people mixed with a worldly lineage, said not heavenly or alien beings. The Indus Valley Civilization Theory. The Indus Valley Civilization Theory, as evidence of the existence of pre-Adamite humans, puts forward the controversial view that the ancient civilization that flourished in the region that now includes Pakistan and northwestern India around 3,300 to 1,300 BC was in fact a non-Adamite society that lived outside the biblical narrative. The Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization, is one of the world's three greatest ancient civilizations, along with Egypt and Mesopotamia. It covers an area of more than 1.25 million square kilometers, with more than 1,000 planned settlements and cities such as Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, which show highly developed urban planning. Supporters of the pre-Adamite theory point to the fact that the Indus Valley civilization had an unsolved writing system, complex drainage system technology, precise weight and size standards, and evidence of trade with Mesopotamia. They argue that the level of complexity of this civilization indicates a development separate from the Adamic lineage described in the Bible. Some theorists claim evidence that the Indus Valley civilization did not emerge gradually, but with sudden technological advances, which they interpret as evidence that this society may have inherited knowledge from previous civilizations or non-human sources. One interesting aspect is the iconography of the Indus Valley religion, including seals with horned figures in a yoga position called Proto-Shaiva, which some researchers suggest shows a belief system completely different from the Abrahamic tradition. Proponents of the pre-Adamite theory see this as evidence that this civilization developed separately from the lineage of Adam and had a different spiritual relationship with supernatural forces. The mainstream scientific community rejects this theory and explains that the chronology of the Indus Valley civilization, developing long after the Neolithic era, which began around 10,000 BC, is fully consistent with the gradual evolution of human society. DNA evidence from human remains at Indus Valley sites shows genetic similarity to other human populations, with no fundamental differences indicating separate origins. Sethian Cainite theory. The Sethian Cainite theory is a controversial interpretation that states that the descendants of Seth, Adam's third son, and the descendants of Cain actually represent two fundamentally different human races, with the descendants of Cain believed to have come from a pre-Adamite nation or to have non-Adamic origins. This theory is rooted in the interpretation of Genesis 4 verses 1-2, where after being expelled from Eden, Adam knew his wife, and Eve gave birth to Cain, saying, "I have gotten a son with the help of the Lord." Some ancient Jewish interpretations, such as Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, interpret that this help of the Lord indicates that Cain was not entirely the son of Adam, but rather the result of Eve's relationship with Samael, a fallen angel figure, or another entity. In the Gnostic tradition, especially the Sethian sect of the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, there is a doctrine that distinguishes between the spiritual seed of Set, Sethian, who is considered a pure spiritual descendant, and the materialistic seed of Cain, Cainite, who is considered to have a lower essence. Gnostic texts such as the Apocryphon of John even mention that Cain was the son of Arkansakla, Yaldabaoth, and Eve. Some proponents of this theory point to Genesis 4 verses 16-17, which tells of Cain going from the presence of the Lord to the land of Nod and getting a wife there. They speculate that Cain's wife came from a pre-Adamite community that had existed before. Another aspect that supports this theory is the striking difference between the descriptions of the sons of men and the sons of God in Genesis 6, verses 1-4, which some researchers interpret as a meeting between two different lineages, the descendants of Seth, the sons of God, and the descendants of Cain, the sons of men. From an archaeological perspective, some theorists associate the Neolithic cultural divide and the emergence of agriculture separately in some regions of the world as potential evidence of two paths of human cultural evolution. However, the mainstream scientific community rejects this theory because genetic evidence clearly shows that all modern humans share the same origins, with no indication of two sources of different humanity. The Ruah Elohim theory. The Ruah Elohim theory, also known as the gap theory, proposes a controversial interpretation of Genesis 1 verse 2, which states, "The earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God, Ruah Elohim, was hovering over the waters." Supporters of this theory argue that the Hebrew word tohu wabohu, without form and empty, actually describes a state of chaos and destruction, not the absence of original form. They claim that this phrase indicates the results of the destruction of the pre-Adamite civilization that existed before, not the situation of the initial creation. Thomas Chalmers, a Scottish theologian, was one of the early developers of this theory, which was later popularized by C.I. Scofield in Scofield Reference Bible, 1909. They suggest a very long time gap between Genesis 1 verse 1, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," and Genesis 1 verse 2, where a pre-Adamite civilization may have existed and was later destroyed. Other proponents, such as George H. Pember in his book Earth's Earliest Ages, 1876, link the destruction of the pre-Adamite world to the rebellion of Lucifer. They interpret verses such as Isaiah 14 verse 12-17 and Ezekiel 28 verse 12-19 as descriptions of a cosmic rebellion that resulted in the destruction of pre-Adamite civilization. From a linguistic perspective, some scholars point out that the Hebrew verb haya in Genesis 1 verse 2 can be translated became rather than was, supporting the interpretation that the earth became formless and empty as a result of an event, not its initial condition. Isaac Vail and Donald W. Patton developed the theory that a layer of water or canopy of ice covered the atmosphere of the pre-Adamic Earth, creating greenhouse conditions that supported advanced civilization until the destruction released the water and caused the Ice Age. Critics from the theological community reject this theory by pointing out that the interpretation of tohu wabohu as destruction is not supported by the literary context of Genesis 1, which clearly describes a process of progressive creation, not restoration. Modern geology also finds no evidence of a single global cataclysm, separating the two eras of human civilization. The serpent seed theory. The serpent seed theory centers on the controversial interpretation of Genesis 3 verse 15, where God said to the serpent, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. Her offspring will crush your head, and you will crush his heel." Proponents of this theory claim that the serpent's seed is not a spiritual metaphor, but refers to literal genetic descendants originating from the sexual relationship between the serpent, and believed to be a physical manifestation of Satan or a supernatural entity, and Eve. In this interpretation, Cain is considered the first descendant of this serpent's seed, explaining why he was able to kill his brother. Pseudo-epigraphic literature, such as The Rise of Moses, mentions that Samael, a satanic figure, appeared in the form of a snake and implanted the seed of evil in Eve. Some Gnostic texts, such as Hypostasis of the Archons, also present a similar narrative in which a certain archon is associated with Eve. Modern proponents of this theory, such as Arnold Murray and the serpent seed or two-seed line movement, interpret that the genetic lineage of this serpent seed still exists today. They claim that the human duality described in various parts of the Bible, sheep versus goats, wheat versus tares, actually refers to two different genetic lineages, the Adamic lineage and the serpent lineage. From an archaeological perspective, some theorists link this theory to the tradition of snake cults that were widespread in various ancient civilizations, including the Ophite cult in the Gnostic tradition. Some extreme interpreters even use this theory to support the ideology of racial supremacy by claiming that certain ethnic groups represent the seed of the serpent. The mainstream scientific and theological communities categorically reject this theory. Bible scholars emphasize that seed in Genesis 3 verse 5 is a metaphorical term in the context of the narrative, not a literal genetic reference. From a biological perspective, interspecies reproduction between humans and reptiles or supernatural entities is impossible, and modern DNA analysis shows that all humans share the same genetic origins from an African ancestor about 200,000 years ago. The ancient Nephilim theory. The ancient Nephilim theory proposes the controversial hypothesis that the creatures called Nephilim in Genesis 6 verse 4 were not just the offspring of the marriage of the sons of God with the sons of men after the time of Adam, but were the remnants of a pre-Adamite human race that survived a previous cosmic catastrophe. Genesis 6 verse 4 states, "In those days the giants Nephilim were on earth, and also after that when the sons of God approached the daughters of humanity." The phrase "and also after that" has been interpreted by some interpreters to mean that the Nephilim existed before this interdimensional marriage event occurred. The Book of Enoch, an apocryphal text quoted in the letter of Jude in the New Testament, gives a more detailed description of the Nephilim as hybrid giant creatures with extraordinary powers who eventually became cannibals and caused chaos on earth. However, ancient texts such as the Book of Giants from the Dead Sea Scrolls imply that some Nephilim may have survived various divine judgments. Proponents of this theory often relate it to the global tradition of giants that is found in almost all ancient cultures. They point to the large human bones that are claimed to have been found in various locations. Although most of this evidence cannot be verified or has been proven to be misidentified fossils of large mammals, some interpreters associate the existence of megaliths and ancient cyclopean structures, buildings made of very large stones such as Baalbek in Lebanon, where some foundation stones weigh up to 800 tons, as evidence of the existence of creatures with physical strength far exceeding that of ordinary humans. Conspiracy theorists like Steve Quayle claim that various governments have discovered and hidden the skeletons of the Nephilim, which they believe to be evidence of a pre-Adamite civilization. Some claim that the DNA of these Nephilim may have survived to this day, influencing the genetic development of modern humans. Mainstream scientists and archaeologists reject this theory, explaining that there is no convincing fossil evidence of the existence of giant human-like creatures. They interpret the Nephilim narrative as a Hebrew adaptation of the myth of demigod heroes common in Mesopotamian mythology, such as Gilgamesh, rather than as a historical record of pre-Adamite creatures. The two seeds theory. The two-seed theory proposed the highly controversial view that Eve became pregnant and conceived from two different seeds simultaneously, one from Adam and one from the serpent, and believed to be the physical manifestation of Satan or a supernatural entity. According to this theory, this phenomenon created two fundamentally different human lineages that continue to exist today. Supporters of this theory base their argument on a literal interpretation of Genesis 4, verse 1 to 2, where the text mentions that Eve gave birth to Cain, then gave birth again, Yalad, to his brother Abel. Some extreme interpreters claim that there is no explicit statement that Adam was Cain's father, while Genesis 4, verse 25 specifically states that Seth was Adam's descendant. This theory is reinforced by the biological phenomenon called heteropaternal superfecundation, a rare condition in which a woman can become pregnant from two different fathers if she has sexual intercourse with two different men within the same fertilization time window. Proponents of this theory claim that this is what happened to Eve, who had intercourse with the serpent and Adam in close proximity. Some Talmudic traditions contain implicit references to this. Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer states that Samael, a satanic figure, rode a serpent, seduced Eve, and defiled her with impurity. Zohar, the main Kabbalah text, mentions that Eve had been with another being before Adam, and from this relationship Cain was born. Proponents of the two seeds theory, such as Arnold Murray, claim that this duality explains the struggle between good and evil throughout human history. They argue that Cain's descendants, believed to be the seed of the serpent, waged a continuous war against Adam's descendants through Seth, considered to be the divine lineage. The mainstream scientific and theological communities categorically reject this theory. Biblical exegesis experts point out that the Genesis narrative aims to convey the theological truth about the origin of sin, not genetic details. From a scientific perspective, genetic evidence clearly shows that all modern humans share the same ancestors, with no evidence of two fundamentally different bloodlines as claimed by the two-seed theory. The Cain-Mark theory. The Cain's-Mark theory is a controversial interpretation of Genesis 4, verse 15, in which after Cain killed his brother Abel, God gave Cain a mark to protect him so that everyone who meets him will not kill him. Proponents of the pre-Adamite theory claim that this everyone refers to non-Adamite humans who already existed outside the territory of Eden. According to the Genesis narrative, after killing Abel, Cain complained to God that everyone who meets me will kill me, see Genesis 4, verse 14. A crucial question arises, who are these people if, according to traditional interpretation, there are only Adam, Eve, and Cain left on earth? Supporters of the pre-Adamite theory claim that Cain's fear indicates the existence of another human community outside of Adam's family. They argue that Cain could not possibly have been afraid of his own unborn family, but of a group of non-Adamite humans already inhabiting the land of Nod, Genesis 4, verse 16. Various speculations have arisen about the nature of this mark. Some interpreters propose that the mark was a tattoo or physical modification that indicated Cain as divinely protected. Midrashic Jewish traditions such as Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer describe this mark as a letter of God's name carved on Cain's forehead. Some theorists associate Cain's mark with the tradition of banishment in various ancient cultures where individuals who violated social taboos were given special marks and expelled, not killed. An anthropological approach suggests that this mark may be a form of social taboo that protects Cain from the revenge of non-Adamite groups. Archaeologist William Albright suggested that Cain may have represented a nomadic group of metalworkers, Kenites, who had tribal markings as part of their identity, indicating their relationship to a more sedentary agricultural population. This is in line with Genesis 4, verse 22, which mentions Cain's descendants as metalworkers. The mainstream scientific and theological communities reject this interpretation, explaining that the Genesis narrative is aimed at an audience that already understands that there are many other humans born to Adam and Eve who are not explicitly recorded. They argue that Cain's fear refers to his own future relatives who will avenge Abel's death, not to the pre-Adamite nation. The pre-cosmic catastrophe. The pre-cosmic catastrophe theory proposes the speculation that before the creation of Adam, the earth was inhabited by a high level of human civilization that was destroyed by a global-scale cosmic catastrophe. Supporters of this theory claim that evidence of the existence of this pre-Adamite civilization is hidden in mysterious megalithic structures such as the pyramids of Giza, Göbekli Tepe, and Pumapunku. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is the main focus of this argument. The 12,000-year-old site features carved stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in precise circles, built by a people who were supposed to still be hunting and gathering and were not yet familiar with agriculture. Proponents of the pre-catastrophe theory argue that technical capabilities like this could not have appeared suddenly without a transfer of knowledge from a previous civilization. The Giza pyramid is also often used as evidence. Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock in The Orion Mystery claim that the precise layout of the Giza pyramid reflects the position of the stars in Orion's belt around 10,500 BC, long before the era of Adam's creation in traditional biblical chronology. Researchers such as Randall Carlson identify geological evidence such as microscopic layers of spherules, nanodiamonds, and unusual traces of platinum in various layers of Earth's sediments as evidence of a massive comet or asteroid impact around 12,800 years ago, Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. They speculate that this disaster destroyed the pre-Adamite civilization and caused the last ice age. The myth of the universal flood, found in almost all ancient traditions around the world, not just the Noah narrative, is considered a collective memory passed down from the survivors of the destroyed pre-Adamite civilization. Plato, in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, mentions the sunken civilization of Atlantis, which some proponents of this theory interpret as a reference to the pre-Adamite civilization. The mainstream scientific community generally rejects this theory, explaining that ancient megalithic structures are the result of gradual human technological achievements, not evidence of knowledge inherited from pre-catastrophe civilizations. They point out that the established archaeological chronology does not indicate any knowledge gap that would indicate the sudden loss of civilization.